Good afternoon now, everyone. Glad to have you here with us on Just Ask Pastor Derrick. Again, just a reminder, just 2 more weeks of it in a regular way, like what we're doing right now with a live show at noon. We're going to replace these, I guess, starting, I guess it'll be 2 weeks from today with little video vignettes that be 3 to 5 minutes long, and we'll kind of release those every few weeks, every 2 weeks from here on out. Occasionally, we may have a Just Ask Pastor Derrick that would show up for us to do something like this, do it live, maybe do it in the evening where more people are able to attend, remembering this started during the pandemic. But just a couple more weeks right now in this particular format, and away we go, and pulling up our questions as they come in. First question. With the recent Supreme Court ruling on sexual orientation discrimination, what are your concerns for our church? And I think at this point, everybody is pretty familiar with the ruling that the Supreme Court had, making gender identity and sexuality part of the definition of sex in civil rights laws, and therefore making it illegal to fire people on the basis of those things. There is a religious exclusion, but the problem is that exclusion was not defined, really. And as a result of it not being tightly defined, actually, the specter was raised by Gorsuch, who wrote a Trump appointee who wrote the opinion. They anticipate lots of challenges to this going forward. They were not ruling on what the religious exemption was. They were just stating that there was one. And so you'll see things get pushed. I doubt seriously that churches are going to feel this, in the sense that a church like ours, which is only doing ministry, does not have a school or anything like that. I doubt we feel that. I think it would be pretty readily recognized that an administrative assistant or someone else couldn't work here because of our beliefs about sexuality and gender. However, where it's going to be felt, in my opinion, are those that have schools. Can I not hire a teacher on the basis of this? I think there will be challenges there. I think there are going to be challenges for Christian higher education. I think they've already started to come, and I think that they'll accelerate. But as it affects our church, will this ruling affect us? I can't really see a situation right now where we would be affected by that, just because I think it's going to be more broadly interpreted as far as people who do normal jobs, teachers, professors, custodians, those kinds of things in those kind of secondary church ministries. But we'll see. The world is changing, and we need to just be prepared for our people to become increasingly more the minority. We are not the majority anymore by any stretch of the imagination. It's been that way for a long time. I don't wring my hands over that because the church always seems to do very, very well when it's not the majority. The other thing I would say to you is that this just proves once again that Christians have placed far too much trust in the judiciary and laws and legislation to prop us up. Every opinion of the Supreme Court that wraps evangelicals around the axle, and I mean going all the way back to Roe versus Wade, have either been written by a Republican appointee, or the conservative justices that Republicans have appointed have sided with the majority. So they passed because of that. We have yet to see where on these kinds of key issues for us, at least what we say are key issues for us, where that's worked in our favor. I'm not saying you don't vote. I'm not saying that you don't consider the judiciary. I'm just saying that to make it the end-all be-all solution not only doesn't make sense historically, because it's not, but it doesn't make sense biblically. You don't put your trust in horses and chariots. Put them in the Lord. And he's going to see us through, even if he takes us through challenges to get there. All right, that's the first question. Continuing to be off and running. Romans 13 describes how God ordains governmental authority, by extension, law enforcement. I gotta get the whole question up here. Law enforcement to restrain humanity's sinful nature and to protect the good and punish evil. Is any effort to defund, abolish law enforcement considered unbiblical? So we're talking about the defund the police movement right now. I think one thing it's important for us to see in this discussion right now highlights it is that we live in a revolutionary age, and I don't mean to use that in a hyperbolic kinds of way. I mean that in a very very reality-based assessment of where we are. We live in a revolutionary age. If you study history at all, you understand that in these kinds of times, various groups rise up, and a new world order is being created. And the defund the police kind of movement is a sign of that revolutionary age. Now, lest we be confused about this at all, the right has exhibited a revolutionary spirit as well. But that revolutionary spirit is manifested from the left, from this movement to defund the police. As I understand it right now, neither one of the presidential candidates support that. They support reform. I think that is the way to do it. And, I have a brother-in-law who's a police officer in Aurora, Colorado. And so I don't say this disconnected from law enforcement. We have law enforcement in our community, or in our church community, that serve faithfully and well. So I with those things understood, I believe in that there needs to be a need for reform. I have my own ideas about how that reform might need to take place, ongoing mental health checkups, because it's a hard job, a variety of things like that. But the defund the police is an anarchist statement, and I don't think you could support that. I don't think you'd support that in Scripture. I think it's important if somebody engages you in that conversation to find out, okay, tell me what you mean by that. And what they may mean is that we just need to completely rebuild our police force at the local level. And some communities have done that. But just the idea, just abolish police, even, they're saying that you take that money and invest it in community services and self-policing and all those kinds of things. It's an anarchist kind of mindset, part of the revolutionary spirit of the age. And I think as a matter of course should be rejected as a solution for our current problems by people who take God's word seriously. If we all came from Adam and Eve, where did the different races come from? I think we have to admit that for the most part, the Bible is silent on that particular subject. It does hint at where they might come from. I believe that the Babel experience that we find in the early chapters of Genesis, where mankind is scattered and spread out and language changes, is probably the birth point of all of that. But it is a bit of a reading into that experience to claim that ethnicities came from it. I don't believe, when I pastored in the rural South and had to preach what the mark of Cain meant in Genesis chapter 4, when Cain is judged and is worried he's going to be attacked, and God puts a mark on him. And old Southern white supremacist theology said that mark was dark skin. And so the idea being somehow that Adam and Eve, clearly born in the Middle East, were white people with, blonde hair and blue eyes. It was ridiculous, but I had to teach around it. But some people still, I think, hold on to that, not knowing the racist undertones of that. That's not what that means. I think the best guess is the Tower of Babel, but the Bible is silent on it. I would say that clearly the New Testament teaches that Christ is to bring us back to being one underneath him. And so people from every tribe, tongue, and nation are brought back together as one people one citizenship, one kingdom under his rule. And so it doesn't mean that ethnicity is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it does mean that those things tend to divide us, and Christ intends for us to bring all of that as one underneath his rule, and that's what eternity will be like. Next question. Wish to be clear, I'm not advocating violence, however, that's always a good way to start a question. However, if abortion is the murdering of an innocent life, wouldn't violence be a measured response to abortion in order to stop it? I've heard it described as the Holocaust of the 21st century. I think abortion is as vile a thing as exists right now in American society, and I do believe it's a Holocaust. I do believe that it goes against science and the human heart and everything else to justify it. You have to suspend reality to make abortion a viable option. But that said, it's very important when you're wrangling in the world of biblical ethics to not reduce everything to an equation, because if you do that, you are being almost Darwinistic in your decision making, and I think biblical decision making can't be all the time, at least, reduced to an equation. If you reduce this particular question to an equation, you'd say, well, in order to save us innocent life, I have to stop an unjust life. And so you can put things in the scales and weigh them and think the greater good is to save the innocent life, so I'll take this unjust life, which is what happened with Dr. Toller in Wichita many years ago. Someone took his life. But I don't think Jesus intends for us to reduce ethical decision making in his kingdom to a mere equation. And I think if we step back from that and just recognize, would Jesus do it? Would Jesus take someone's life to preserve an innocent life? Can we see him killing George Toller, for example? And I think obviously the answer is no. And it doesn't pass, for, if you'll forgive the kind of crass analogy, it doesn't pass the smell test of Christianity to adopt that. And the person who wrote the question obviously is feeling that. They're just saying, how do I get around this? And I think it's important to understand that there's all manner of evil that could have been stopped like that and never happened had Christ decided, for instance, when he's standing before Pilate, to call down the angels and inaugurate his kingdom, missing the cross. We could have avoided every world war and every war that is unnamed. We could have, literally hundreds of millions of lives would not have been lost to evil had Christ called the angels down when he was standing before Pilate. But he didn't, because there's a greater purpose plan. And I think in the world in which we live, we need to understand that God is allowing this evil to exist in our world when he clearly could stop it. And the reason why, we don't know, but we do know that we as citizens of the kingdom are to stand in the strength of our convictions of a new kind of living, and we need to advocate for the unborn. I think it's okay to disrupt the process in whatever way that you can, through peaceful protest, or whatever you can do. But I think we also need to understand that probably for us to really be considered pro-life, we need to move out of the protest and move more to the being, proactive. There are a lot of unborn lives that wouldn't be taken if, for instance, Christians had a passion for addressing the issue of poverty. Joey Jewett this past Thursday night referenced the poverty driving an abortion decision in the life of one of his students, where he's a principal. So that Christians need to be active. That Christians need to be active in adoption. I mean, if more Christians made themselves available to do adoptions, then those things wouldn't happen at the rate at which they are. So, the protest stuff hadn't worked. I mean, we're coming up on 50 years with Roe versus Wade in our country, and I just don't have any hope that there's going to be a judicial solution to that. So Christians are going to have to recognize that, just being angry about it is not going to accomplish anything. We have to actually get further involved, and maybe some young families in our church will begin to say, you know what, we can have children on our own, but we're also going to adopt a child. Beautiful story I just happened to see, not knowing this question was going to come up, from John Piper last night. It's about a 20-minute kind of movie that was made called Bloodlines. So if you want to watch that and watch how he dealt with racism in his heart, and it culminated in his adoption of an African-American daughter, it'd be fun for you to watch. So Google John Piper Bloodlines, and I think you'll be blessed. It's a really moving story. Continuing to move on. Let me condense a long question and cut right to the heart of it. We see several times in the Old Testament that God changed his mind. I mean, it's God repented, God decided not to do, God changed his mind. So then the question is, ultimately, did God really change his mind? I mean, did prayer shift him? And we actually had this question in our teaching team meeting this past week, as we were kind of wrestling through a particular passage that's coming from 1 John later in the month of July. And here's kind of what we landed on. When God ordains a plan, and I believe he is. I believe we live in a world that where God is sovereign down to the movement of atoms. He also ordains the means to that end, and he has ordained that prayer accomplish his will and his purposes. So some people would say it appears that God changed his mind, but he didn't. I wouldn't go that far. What I would say is that God, before the foundation of the world, created a moment where Moses, for instance, would intercede for the people. And on the basis of his intercession, God would not do something he told Moses he was going to do. I think in that moment, especially from Moses's perspective, there was a real opportunity for a decision to be made. There was a legitimate moral choice that he was being asked to make, and there's mystery and tension here. There was genuine freedom given by God for Moses to make a decision that he would act on, but God ordained before the foundation of the world that Moses would pray that prayer and that God would do X. So I don't think God changes his mind in the human sense. I think he presents for us opportunities to plead with him and to bring our lives underneath his greater will. And so I don't think we're to understand best those passages that God actually changes his mind in the sense that we might think about that as humans. What is the best way to avoid idolatry of leaders we admire? I would say meet them if you get any opportunity, and most of the time you will be disabused of any idol worship. And that's not entirely true. There are guys that I really admire and respect that I've met, and that meeting them actually heightens the admiration and respect. We live in a world right now, again, part of the revolutionary age. We're lifting up people. This person, we gotta be fully behind this particular political figure. He's going to save us, or this particular religious leader. This is happening somewhat in the Southern Baptist Convention. He's going to save us. I would just simply say that if you ever get with anyone where you cannot critique them, you have made that person an idol. And I can name right now a preacher in my mind who absolutely refuses, regardless of what the political figure does, to critique a political figure. And he's what in the Old Testament was a court prophet. He was simply there under the guise of religion to say what the king wanted to hear. And I think we've got people in the pulpit who do that kind of thing. I also think sometimes it's easy to, on the flip side, to never say anything good. And I think if you get to a point where you can't say anything good about someone, you've probably made something else an idol, and that thing or person an object of your wrath. So I just say get to a point where you can critique someone, and just remember this. And I said this to a friend this morning. The two things that blind loyalty and blind rage have in common is not being able to see. And if you are blindly loyal, you're not going to be able to see what needs to be fixed. And if you're in a blind rage, you're not going to be a part of any solution. You're just going to be a part of the anger. So be careful with your leaders. Next, I've heard books like Jesus Calling being dangerous, as the author claims to hear Jesus speak to her and she writes down the messages to be shared. What do I say about that? Well, I've never read Jesus Calling. I understand a lot of people have read it and been blessed by it. I cannot speak to the content, though, so I don't know if she hears from Jesus and writes some things down. It may indeed be true. I'm not doubting you're lying to me. I'm just saying I'm always reluctant to say, yep, that's exactly what's going on when I myself haven't read it. I do think that there is a tendency right now by the theology police that is active on Twitter to jump on someone if they don't say something precisely like they think it should be said. So, for instance, someone says, the other day Jesus said to me, if that person means I had direct revelation from Jesus that was contradictory to Scripture and didn't support and didn't lead me back to Scripture, then yes, we need to jump on that person. That is dangerous. That is going to lead away from Scripture and to a false teaching. But if someone is just saying, I've been praying about this and I feel like God is saying to me, then that's not heresy. That's just somebody walking with Jesus. So I wish the theology police on Instagram on Twitter and all of these things would kind of take a break. Here's what I'd say about devotional literature in general, since I can't speak to devotional literature or the particular book, Jesus Calling. Things properly written, soundly, robustly theological can help us in our Bible reading. Too many times, devotional reading replaces Bible reading. And if you're having a devotion that is not Bible-centric, then you need to put Jesus Calling down. And that's not knowing any of its details. If it's the best book ever, if you're just reading Jesus Calling and not reading the Bible, you need to put Jesus Calling down. The Bible needs to be the basis of our devotion. All right, we are past time to deal with serious things. So let me start trying to hop in on a few. There's only been a few given so far of more fun things. What are my favorite brands? Well, brands. So like they make products and I'm a fan of those products. Well, I would say, obviously, shirt-wise, I'm a fan of Chubby's shirts because I wear those a lot in the summertime. Anyway, I'm a fan of Ryobi lawn tools, house tools. So all of my tools that I have at the house, from my lawnmower, which is a battery-operated lawnmower, and it just changed my life, not having to worry about gas or anything, to trimmers, to sawzalls, to blowers, to drills, to levels, to everything. I use Ryobi a lot. I even have a speaker that we use that floats in the pool, and you can listen to music. It's a Ryobi speaker, put a battery in it. So probably Ryobi in general with a lot of things. That's kind of what comes to mind. Let's see. Gosh, that was the only fun question so far. So let me answer one of these other questions, and if another fun one pops in, we'll get to it. This is kind of a separate. What needs does our church have now and in the coming future? You're welcome for the shameless plug. It says, well, thank you for the opportunity to ask the question or answer the question. I might say our biggest. Seriously, I'm totally serious. The biggest need our church has right now is for everybody to chill out. Everybody's at a breaking point because of the revolutionary spirit of the age, because we have been home for so long. I think everybody just needs to chill out and give people a break. We've not really had much pushback on any of the things that we've done to get things back up and running again. But you can just feel it in our church family underneath the surface. Everybody is about to snap. And so I'm totally serious. The biggest need that we have right now in our church is for everybody to chill out and show grace on social media, in your interactions with people, in your interactions with your family. Just seriously, everybody needs to relax. We're going to be okay. I know it's a rough time. I really do. I mean, I've had lengthy conversations this week about exactly how revolutionary I think the age is in which we live. It is the most dangerous time that I've ever lived in, for a whole lot of reasons that don't fit neatly into any kind of political system. And that can get scary and get people's passions inflamed. Everybody needs to chill out and show each other grace. Okay, so somebody is asking, have you ascended to the revelation of the safety razor or straight razor? They perfected the craft and made it skillful art. New stuff makes it task and not an art. Well, I will tell you, I have for years used the double-edged safety razor. I have a scuttle in the morning. I whip up in that heated scuttle my shaving cream, and I brush it on. And then I use a double-edged safety razor to shave. So I've been shaving like that for years. I don't. It really does. You get a better shave. You're not getting nicked up and ingrown hairs and razor burn, all that stuff. It's just the best thing. I have tried a straight razor a couple of times. Every time I've tried a straight razor on my own, I have nearly decapitated myself, and so I'm kind of away from the straight razor. But I tell you what, I will right now sign up to have a straight razor shave. I love getting a straight razor shave, laying back, getting hot lather on you, towels, all that stuff. And then somebody to use a straight razor that knows what they're doing. I may do that on vacation. I'm going on vacation in July. I may, if I can, find me a place to give me a straight razor shave, because man, that is the bomb.com. Love it. How's my Mustang running? I do have a Mustang. And traded it a year ago. I had a truck, had driven a truck for almost 20 years, decided my wife's car was big enough for me to hunt in, and that my son had a truck and he lived close enough to me that I could borrow it. And so I traded for a Mustang, and it's running great, and I love it. It is the first car I ever remember wanting. When I was a little boy and started thinking about cars, it was the first car I ever thought about, and it's a convertible. So, I mean, I drive to work with the top down. I drive home with the top down. Julie and I will go out in the evenings and just drive around with the top down. I love it. Used to have a motorcycle. Don't have a motorcycle anymore. This is safer, and it gives me the same kind of feeling. Love it. Mustang's doing great. What are our family remedies for a common cold or upset stomach? Well, I'm famous for never having an upset stomach. That's just the way it is. I mean, in my family, seriously, I've gone decades without being indelicate, reversing the flow, as it were. So I don't know that we have any favorite remedies for sleep for a cold and upset stomach. It just never happens. So my favorite plant. What is my favorite plant? Well, because I'm from Arizona, I love Arizona. I'd say a saguaro cactus, the big cactus. Love those. Best meal I've ever had. Honestly, this is going to sound silly, and it's almost embarrassing to even say, but it's true. I had a perfect storm moment at Tony Roma's once in Dallas, Texas, in the West End in Dallas, Texas, before seeing the Nashville Predators play the Dallas Stars. I had beef ribs at Tony Roma's, which honestly were transcendent. They were completely transcendent. I've never had them again there that even approached it being that good. That is hands down the best single meal I have ever had. Beach or mountains, I hate the beach. So mountains. There's too much sand, and I hate the beach. Do not like the beach. I like the ocean. Don't like the beach. Um, how bad do you want a truck? Real men drive trucks. Well, I've done it for a long time. And again, when you're a real man, you can say to somebody else, give me your truck. And that's what I do with my son all the time. Give me your truck. I used it this last week. Where would I want to be a missionary? That'll be the last question. We'll have to shut it down there. Where would I want to be a missionary? Um, huh. I have, as much as I hate cold weather, this is not, I have a real fondness for Canada. Even, obviously, in just the normal kinds of Canada's fun to visit place, but I have a fondness for the Canadian people, and they desperately need the gospel. We think America is post-Christian. It pales in comparison to Canada. I think they're like 3% of the population is if what we would classify evangelical Christian, not as a political designation, but as a theological definition. So maybe Canada. Um, I'd want to be a missionary, which is somebody just kicked in outside the USA. Canada is outside the USA. So anyway, that's probably me. That's probably where I'd want to be, just because people have a huge need up there. So anyway, all right, guys. Good day. Lots of good questions. Appreciate you asking all of those good questions. And we'll be back for our last one of these like this for a while anyway, next Wednesday. So you all have a great day.